Want to knock over a casino? 3 casinos?
Vegas, huh?
Vegas?
Vegas.
Fantastic.
The heist is impossible.
Casino security cannot be beaten. You're out of your minds.
Exactly.
People love to talk about movies. Good or bad, old or new. Even people who don't watch movies love to talk about them. And that's what we're going to do here today. This is Talking About Movies. I am Margaret McGurk, and joining us is T.T. Stern-Enzi, critic, educator, film festival director, a man who wears many, many hats.
Many hats.
And our topic is remakes. We all know that Hollywood suffers from some creative bankruptcy because they keep trying to take somebody else's good idea and make it over and turn it into a successful movie. Once in a while it works. Very often it does not.
Right.
Very often it's impossible to imagine why they thought they could make a success out of it. I think the textbook case of this is Psycho.
Yes. Yes.
The original black and white movie by Alfred Hitchcock is one of the most influential films ever made. Every filmmaker in the world is learned from Psycho. Somebody got the bright idea a few years back to remake the exact same movie, shot for shot, line for line, except in color.
Right. Which, starting off, you just shouldn't remake Hitchcock films.
Right.
Period.
Right. Nobody is Hitchcock.
Yeah. Hitchcock remade Hitchcock one time.
Yeah.
He did it once, updated himself that one time. That's it. He set the standard for what his story should look like. We shouldn't try to, and again, you're right, the whole shot-for-shot reshooting of a film, just doing it in color, there's no creativity in that if you really think about it.
I mean, why bother?
Yeah, what's the point?
It didn't bring in a new audience. It just did nothing. There's a mystery, just like head scratching remakes. Why bother? Happens all the time. There's one that's on the horizon, hasn't happened, and people really are praying that it doesn't. Steven Spielberg, a great talent, is threatening to remake West Side Story,
right?
Which is as classic as it gets.
Yes. Yes.
What does he think he's going to do? How could that? It's terrifying to think of.
And again, I think what's going to happen, people are going to look at the idea, okay, it's Steven Spielberg, maybe he has, a real affinity, or maybe that was one of those touchstone films for him when he was a kid growing up, or whatever, that he's just like, okay, he's invested, his passion is in retelling that story. Yeah. He may get a little latitude for that aspect of it, but again, it just falls in line with this idea that you just don't take something that worked so well.
Right.
And think you can do it better.
Every part of that movie, the original, is just right. It is dated, but it is in a good way, in the right way. It's an object of its time. Trying to modernize it is not going to make it better.
Right, right. And again, the modernizing aspect, and we're probably going to talk about this over the course of this whole segment, just the idea that audiences today need to see a version of these stories that speaks to them in some way. I think there's a problem with with the logic behind that.
Yes, they give audiences too little credit.
Right.
And they also give themselves too much credit. Other movies that keep getting remade to no particularly good effect. Godzilla. How many versions of Godzilla have been had?
Right.
And are any of them better than the inexpensive black and white little original? Not really.
Right. Not at all.
What about King Kong? How many King Kongs do we have to see before they just stop trying to...
The King Kong problem sets up exactly what we're talking about, because King Kong has been remade all these times, and they've told, maybe not shot for shot, but they've generally told the exact same story every time they've remade it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to add anything new to it, other than, okay, technologically there are things that we can do now that you couldn't do 50 years ago.
Right.
That, again, that shouldn't be enough of an impetus to sort of spark us to revisit these stories. Right. You need more than that. You need to be able to look at it and say, okay, there was something about this that didn't work.
Yes.
And we can make it better. Or
Right.
there's something, some tweak that we can give it that will enhance what was there in the first place.
Well, and of course now the temptation is that people think because we've got modern technology, we've got all the digital effects that we can do, we can create creatures, that somehow that's going to solve whatever problems are with the first, and it's like, that's not enough.
No.
You get pretty pictures from it, but it doesn't give you a story.
Right.
Now, occasionally it works, and here's a good example, Ocean's 11.
Yes.
The remake of Ocean's 11 was fresh, it was modern, there was, they modernized the story, but not too much.
Right. I think what's so fascinating about that is you had a director, and again, we just finished talking about Steven Spielberg and West Side Story, but Soderbergh really kind of embraced the idea of that, and you get the sense that that was all him.
Yeah.
His feel and style and tone and everything about it, yeah. If you've got a filmmaker with a particular vision or way of approaching the material, then okay, sometimes maybe it is worth to see where this person is going to take this story idea.
Yeah.
But again, we also have to acknowledge the fact that the first film wasn't necessarily a classic in the way that we might want to look at some of these other films. It wasn't West Side Story.
No, it was not West Side. It was a fondly remembered popular film.
Right.
That's true.
It was the Rat Pack. They were, and it felt like it was just a bunch of those guys hanging out having a good time.
That's right. Well, a great heist movie is hard to beat.
True.
If you have a good cast and you have a sharp story, a nice plot with all the little ins and outs and twists and turns and backflips that you get with a heist, you're gonna, that's hard to resist. Those are usually fun movies.
Right, and like I said, that's all Soderbergh taking all of those elements and sort of saying, okay, I can do something with it. I can have some fun with that.
Yeah.
And it was worth it.
Absolutely. Well, now there's another example that we could talk about. George Romero, who made Night of the Living Dead and kind of invented the modern zombie movie as we know it, remade his own sequel with Dawn of the Dead.
Right. Dawn of the Dead is an interesting film in that I think Dawn of the Dead works because somewhere in the idea and the premise of that story, what it was actually saying when it was first made was still weirdly relevant when it was remade.
Yeah.
We wanted to look at this idea of consumerism and the horrors of consumerism and taking the zombies and having them kind of speak for that mind state.
Yeah.
There was some genius in that, so that was an idea that wasn't going to be dated. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being with us, DT.
Thank
This has
you.
been fun.
This has.
We'll have to do it again.
All right.
Thank you for being with us. This is Talking About Movies.